Shit. Shit.
Hey, Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and
Fucking abuse.
Hey, Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and
Fucking abuse, man.
We're also following this breaking news out of South Carolina. This is where the jury has been deliberating the murder charges against former police officer Michael Slager. The jury now coming back into the courtroom and talking to the judge, saying that they're not able to reach consensus. This was after late yesterday the jury asking the judge for the legal difference between fear and passion. Slager was fired from the department after he fatally shot Walter Scott during a traffic stop. Slager testified in his own defense on Tuesday, and he's pleaded not guilty to the charges. If convicted, though, Slager could be sentenced to life in prison. So we're on this verdict watch, and as I said, the jury has come back in talking about not being able to come to a consensus, and Gabe Gutierrez is on the scene there. Ari Melber's still here on set. And Gabe, let me start with you, because there was the question from the jury, and how did the judge respond about differentiating between those two things?
Hi there, Thomas. Good afternoon. Yes, as you mentioned, a lot of activity here just in the last few minutes. The jury coming back into the courtroom right now after a few minutes before that, sending two notes that were read in open court. The first thing they were asking for were a transcript of a statement by Faden Santana. Now, he, you might recall, is the bystander that shot that cell phone video that went viral that really got this case into the national spotlight. So they wanted to hear that statement again. The judge just coming back and saying that it's a different court reporter here. They can't generate a transcript right away, so they have to come back into the courtroom to hear the audio. That may be what's happening now. However, more significantly, the jury also said at 1:12 p.m. they sent a note saying that they could not reach a consensus. So that's what we're hoping to learn more about right now. What often happens in these types of cases is that the judge may tell them to go back into the deliberations, won't let them just not reach a consensus on the first pass. However, if they still cannot reach a consensus going back into the deliberations. That raises a possibility of a hung jury here, and that is what many observers are considering as a very strong possibility at this point. Now, Thomas, I should point out the jury has several options in this case. They can come back with a guilty verdict on the murder charge against Michael Slager. They could also find him guilty of voluntary manslaughter, or this could be an acquittal. The fourth option, of course, being that hung jury at this point. This is a controversial case, obviously. It got a lot of national attention. The city of North Charleston has already approved a $6.5 million civil settlement in this case. And also, early next year, there's a federal civil rights trial that Michael Slager will face. So no matter what happens in this case, this story definitely is not over. But again, right now we are monitoring the courtroom to see if the jury might not be able to reach a consensus, and if that would be a hung jury. The jury is made up of 11 whites and 1 black man. They would need to find any of those options, either guilty on murder, guilty on voluntary manslaughter, or not guilty. They would have to be unanimous, or this will be a mistrial.
So, Thomas, I'm just jumping in. Let's be clear. This is a big deal. This is a case that has gone on for about a month. This is a case because of the video and the shooting in the back of this suspect was a wide national controversy. Many people felt that that video was clear in what it showed. What we are reporting here now for the first time this hour is this jury saying no consensus, that they cannot reach a consensus on a guilty verdict of any kind or an acquittal. That means there are people in that jury room now here deliberating here for several days who are dug in, and they're telling the judge, that's not nothing. That's them telling the judge, we can't agree one way or the other. Now, to Gabe's point, that is not the end of the line. We're not reporting anything yet like a hung jury because the judge has options in instructing them to keep deliberating. But this video, here we see it again, of Walter Scott being shot in the back, and there he is, we now know deceased, as Michael Slager put the handcuffs on him. That video, which many people felt showed something clearly, according to the men and women in that jury room, that video and the other evidence they've reviewed in this lengthy trial is not leading them to a consensus. This is, I would say, a significant development.
What do you think about the fact that the jury wanted to come back asking the judge for the difference between fear and passion, and how much benefit it is to Slager right now, the fact that he testified in his own defense?
It's a great question, Thomas. There are two ways you can interpret that. Number one, that was simply an area of the law that confused them. How passionate or fearful was Officer Slager in the moments that he shot? And number two would be, no, they're focusing on charges or potential crimes only related to those items. So again, to be clear, sometimes you go back to the judge and you say, hey, I didn't get it, I need to learn more about it, and it's just because you're confused. The other option is they were focusing on that. If it was option B, that they were focused on passion and fear, that would make you think that it is more likely that they were looking at the lesser charge, the manslaughter charge. Obviously, a focus on the officer's fear gives some of the benefit of the doubt to him, and the notion of him doing this basically out of a sudden burst of emotion rather than malice, right? The higher murder charge would require malice. They did not ask about malice. So either they were uninterested in that, or they were so clear on it that it just wasn't something they needed an update on. But what we're seeing here in this trial, at least at this moment, the breaking news is the jury telling the judge they haven't reached a consensus. Now the judge has to decide what to do about that. Does he urge them to keep working on this, or does he think this might ultimately be a hung jury?
All right. Thank you very much. And Gabe, thank you.
Congressman, thank you.
Update. Looks like Michael Slager found that one cop apologist he needed. Mistrial pending yesterday. I posted about the fact that the murder trial of Officer Michael Slager had been turned over to the jury for deliberation on a verdict. Within that post, I discussed whether Slager would get away with the murder altogether or be given a light sentence via the lesser manslaughter charge. My bet has been on him walking free via hung jury, since in order to do so he only needs to have one of the 12 jurors be a cop apologist that refuses to find him guilty. The chances of that happening, regardless of his actual guilt, are pretty good, and history has borne that out in previous trials of police. Earlier this afternoon, the first signs that he has hit that rigged lottery began to be reported. One singular juror has indicated that he is unwilling to convict Slager in spite of the video that very clearly depicts him shooting Walter Scott in the back 5 times as he runs away from the North Charleston police officer. Via NBCNEWS.com, emphasis added. A lone juror said they cannot convict a white former police officer who fatally shot a black man in South Carolina, and the judge asked for clarification from the foreperson as to whether the jury is hopelessly deadlocked. The juror in a letter to the court said, "I cannot in good conscience consider a guilty verdict against Michael Slager, a former patrolman who pulled over Walter Scott in North Charleston, and ended up shooting him as a bystander recorded the incident on video." The jury foreperson said in a separate note to the court that it was only one juror who was having issues. Circuit Judge Clifton Newman said. The juror opposed to conviction said in the letter, "I cannot and will not change my mind," Newman said. Slager was charged with murder in Scott's killing, although the jury was allowed to consider a lesser charge of manslaughter in addition to murder. Slager's attorneys requested a mistrial. The wording is interesting in the 2 highlighted statements. Note that he doesn't say, "I don't believe he is guilty," or "I can't be convinced of his guilt." In essence, he says, "I refuse to find him guilty." And that's the reality of the situation and the many, many situations that preceded it. It's not that they don't understand they are guilty, they just refuse to render that verdict. They'll likely go through the motions for a bit longer before that request for a mistrial is granted. They may even decide to stage another trial to stave off the inevitable riots and protests for a while longer. However, they can only kick that can down the road so far. Michael Slager will walk and he'll do it with a smirk on his face while discussing how difficult all this was for him. NBC video, the jury says it's deadlocked.